Hello everyone, welcome back to Homebrew, where we make games work for you. Now today what we're going to be doing is looking back at Taking Roots, particular at session 3 of our campaign. If for you who are not familiar, this is our duet campaign of the RPG called Genesis, of which me and Sarah are going through the backstory of her character Emery. Now, last time we talked, we were going through session 3 of her character, and so we're going to recap what went right and what went wrong on the DM's perspective, and follow that with a planning phase for session 4. Now, today is going to be a bit short, seeing as we actually didn't get to very much content from our last prep planning session in session 3, so we have a lot of material already set and ready for session 4. So, what do we have to go over then? Well, definitely the recap. From the last time that we talked, just you and I added right there in the middle of the session a extra NPC to the Vigor Mortis faction. So originally my plan was to have Penelope be the one that tells Emery about everything going on with the Taylors. But I figured that would be a lot for one particular NPC to handle, both all of the contracts of work to be divvied out from one faction, as well as all of the information that they would have gathered throughout the city and, espionage and everything like that. So I decided right there on the spot to add someone. And what I do typically is I just take some notes as I go along, anything that I improv, and then I do is go back and I just add it back to my Word document. That way later on, if I have some characters who are coming back to this area, I can Control F search, and I've got people, names, descriptions already set up for the world, just to help really include that for immersion, right? And it saves me some hassle, right? I already got some people back there, and it really makes it much more fun for the players to have repeat NPCs. All right, so after our character Emery talked to Penelope, one of the things that they started to ask about was what exactly happened with Nellet. And so that was actually something that we probably should have had a lot more preparation for, right? Why was Nellet in prison? What was so bad? Because if we're trying to investigate his death, we should probably have some information on why he was in prison to begin with, as those are going to be people who already have skin in the game for his murder. And so what we did is we made up on the spot Gwendolyn and Rashad, and a brief description of where they could be found, and then we're just basically going to give some information that basically insinuates, hey, these people couldn't have done it, right? They couldn't have afforded someone who could go up there and kill Nellet or something like that. Basically throw them off the trail of those particular people and get them back onto the right trail, which isn't railroading because that is just what happened in the world, right? So anyways, what else did we go through? Well, one thing was that our character went through all of those trials to try to figure out how to get a hold of the Taylors, and our player was rolling terribly, unfortunately. So they ended up failing on all of those. But the good news is that we didn't need any one of those in particular to success in order for the story to continue, right? Because she was making a lot of noise, and we can justify the Taylors or the Thieves Guild reaching out back to her based off of the noise that they were making to try to figure that out. And that's exactly what we did. We just made up a nice little scenario where they waited until it was dark and where they could isolate her and then say, hey, what do you want, right? So I think that worked out pretty well. Additionally, by having those extra NPCs in the Vigor Mortis area, we were able to include waiting times, which our player took advantage of to try to work on their spells and to reach back out to their brother and really help build up that relationship and that key focus on their character building, which is the whole purpose of the campaign. So that all worked out pretty well. One thing that we did run into as far as a hiccup was when we started narrating kind of their character, trying to cast the spell and trying to figure out whether it worked or not. We kind of narrated them waking up slowly over time. They failed to check with advantage, so we figured, hey, basically it's just that's all you can do for this whole session, right? Because I wasn't really going to gatekeep based off of success or failure whether or not they learned the spell. So I just basically said, hey, that means that it takes the whole time for this to work out, right? So what happened is our player got confused with our description. And so what I did is I just stopped. I said, hey, this is what happened. This is the role. This is what I basically meant. And then we were able to proceed from there. So we just kind of got out of the game just for a second, corrected things, and moved on. And so that's what I would suggest anytime that you're going to be doing any sort of fun descriptive stuff, go with fun first. And if the players are really having a hard time, just break immersion quick, let them know what's going on, and then get back to it. Okay, it really doesn't hiccup it too hard to do that. What does is if you really try to work around it for too long and start beating around the bush, that'll really drag on and just make the players more confused. One thing I would also do is work on speaking plainly more if you seem to be trying to use these fun, anecdotal items or these illusory terms so much that your players keep asking what, I don't get it, that sort of thing. Just speak plainly at that point, okay? Anyways, what else came along? Well, I started to panic a little bit when our player wasn't really comfortable. Our player character wasn't really comfortable with the trade of speaking on behalf of the Vigor Mortis, right? They're like, hey, I only got a couple bucks, right? And they're like, hey, but you represent someone else, right? You can trade more than what you have. Our player, luckily enough, knew exactly what was going on and was going that route, but they were just role-playing, right? Their character wasn't comfortable with that stuff. So we had a really tense situation where, as a DM, I was a bit panicking, but the player eventually acquiesced to what they were asking and moved it forward. And they were going to do that all along. They just wanted to have the fun of the role-playing experience. So that worked out great. And that's kind of where a little bit of the trust system works with players versus DMs. So anyways, that about wraps up what we had. Now, like I said, we planned so much as a DM for this particular session. We've still got the whole dungeon that is essentially tracking down and addressing the hounds of reclamation for our next session. So we really don't need to think too much on that. That'll be plenty for session 4, which gives us time to think about what comes after that. Now, our player already made a mention that they were looking to take a boat with Osaya across all the way down towards Lemoore. We know that'll take a couple of days, so we can know that our next session is probably completely on boat. What do we want to do with that? Do we want to wreck the boat? Do we want them to sail there with no problems? Or do we want to add some panache to the situation, right? And that's where we can talk about potential eagle situations that we talked about, or maybe when they get to the Crystal Cairn, which is basically a giant lake, maybe we want a Loch Ness monster or something like that. So we can add things, and this is, so it could be seen as arbitrary, but it's also could just be seen as, some people use a random a random encounter table or a table generator for this sort of thing, or an encounter generator, sorry. I typically don't like those because it gives a potential for something that doesn't make sense depending on the situation. So like a lot of random encounter generators will have you, be a couple different types of monster types, but there's some reason, like why would you ever have a bunch of trolls fighting you in a desert, right? So I typically stay away from the tables and I just think about, hey, what's going to be fun? That's my agency as a DM. Players don't care about how random the situation is when it comes up, as long as it feels good and that suspension of disbelief can be held. So anyways, on that note, I will see you guys for session 4 with Taking Root on Emery and Sarah's journey through finding the Hounds of Reclamation. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.